Hey everyone, what's going on? Thanks for tuning in to Relevant Jukebox, and today I'm back with a new video here, a little bit of a different video, going over 5 albums that changed my life. So I wanted to start to do a couple different types of videos on the channel that, kind of chronicles my journey as a music fan, music lover. I thought this would be a cool way to start. Now, before I get into these 5 records here, obviously these are going to be, things that impacted me personally and my taste. And I might do a part 2 of this down the line with 5 more albums, as, there's a lot of albums that have impacted me across my life, but I'm going to start with these for now. So yeah, if you guys enjoy this type of content, make sure to drop a like down below and share. And if you have any other ideas of things that you'd want to ask me as far as like suggestions or types of videos, leave a comment in this comment section down below. Love to hear from you guys and what you want to hear me talk about. But let's get into these records here. Starting off with a record from 2001. It's Alexisonfire's Self-Titled. Now, I pretty much started off a lot of my heavy music listening career in the punk and hardcore field. And that led me on, various strains of like emo and hardcore and metal and all that kind of stuff. But I for a while, I was pretty like stuck in that lane of those genres. Like there wasn't really much that broke me out of it. And in my opinion, across all the albums that I listened to, I think this album right here is the holy grail of like screamo. Now, I know it wasn't the first, and I know a lot of people are going to throw out Orchid Chaos Is Me as probably like one of those foundational records, and it certainly is, but this one right here, I think for me, just really clicks. And a lot of that, for me, has to do in the vocal departments here with their screamer, George, I believe his name is, sounding absolutely blood-curdling and menacing, but still discernible in a lot of the lyrics. And how can, of course, you not forget Dallas Green, who really impacted me, I think, pretty heavily. I mean, I'm still a big fan of the sound of his voice, even though maybe I haven't really followed his career through City and Color beyond like as of recent. I just really like the way that they work on this record, and a lot of the instrumentals too. I mean, the chord progressions are just so amazing at times. A lot of the guitar riffs really catchy. And like, I don't know, I mean, I feel like, the way that these tracks operate overall are very moving, very emotional. Still really hit me with the same type of impact that they did when I was really enthralled in this album. Now, I do have it on vinyl. I have one of the original presses through Defiance Records, which is really awesome, and I do suggest seeking out this pressing specifically if you're interested. It is harder to track down. I don't know how many of these actually still exist. There's a lot of rumors out there that some got destroyed in transit, whatever, I don't know. But this was really hard to track down for a while until they reissued it and like remastered the whole thing. Now, I prefer this pressing in particular because it has the original recording on it, which, is a little more rough around the edges, but a lot more raw sounding, especially with something this emotionally potent. I feel like that raw aspect is like absolutely necessary for the music. And it came with like this little booklet. It was like a little CD booklet here. It's got the lyrics, it's got a lot of the artwork, which is interesting. Some girls like having a knife fight on a baseball diamond. And it's a standard black vinyl. Nothing too special about it. But again, this is one of my favorite records in my collection. And it has been for a long time. When I was actually able to finally track a pressing of this down, it was like my white whale. And I'm really just glad that I have it overall. I mean, still to this day, it'll stay in the collection forever. And again, still one of those records that I know, may not be so beloved by the masses, I guess, but, it definitely holds a special place in my heart for my music listening career. This is kind of like the peak of that whole post-hardcore screamo thing for me. Next up is going to be an album from 2009, which is Kid Cudi's Man on the Moon Part 1. Now, this was the record that actually pulled me out of all that punk and hardcore that I was consuming so frequently when I was younger. And obviously, I'm not going to sit here talking about Man on the Moon. It's been talked about for so long at this point, but obviously, the psychedelic rock influences on this album, I think caught my ear overall, but also a lot of the melodies. I mean, some of the choruses on Man on the Moon Volume 1 are so infectious and just like feel good. And, at the time, I was very limited in my hip-hop palette, if you will. I didn't really listen to much hip-hop, so, this record here I can kind of credit for also not only branching me out into different genres of music overall, but, getting me really enthralled into hip-hop back when I was like, a sophomore in college. And here's the record, by the way. I do have it. I do suggest picking it up, even though I don't think it's as easy to track down as it used to be. It's a nice little gatefold press. I did show this one off in my last vinyl collection video if you haven't seen that already, so I'm not going to bother showing you the whole thing. But Kid Cudi, again, I haven't really enjoyed much of his back catalog outside of Man on the Moon 1 and 2 and, you know, a lot of his early mixtapes besides a handful of things here and there. But, you know, I think his impact has already been had, if you will, and kind of changed the game, I think, forever, especially for me. Like I said, I, you know, credit this record for really expanding my mind back in the day where, you know, it kind of snuck up on me unexpectedly. And I can still revisit this and remember the summer when I was really listening to it really heavily, all the experiences I had, the people I was with, and still get a really big enjoyment out of consuming this album. So, hell yeah. Next up is a record from 2012 by one of my favorite bands of all time, Death Grips, No Love Deep Web. Now, you might be wondering, whoa, Chris, why aren't you putting the Money Store on here? You know, that dropped before it. You know, it's a more beloved album, more polished record overall. Yes, I hear that, but I'm going to rewind back to 2012 for a minute here, where I was at in my listening career. And, you know, the Money Store was my exposure to Death Grips overall. When that dropped, I was fortunate enough to have been tipped off on it pretty early on, right after the release. And, you know, it was so polarizing that I didn't even like it at first. There was nothing else out there that sounded like it. I was just really getting my toes deep into other types of music at the time too, so I didn't really know what to make of the Money Store when I first hit it. It kind of like smacked me in the face, and I was like, what was that? But, you know, after that release, over the summer, it started to kind of unravel itself, grow on me a little more. I mean, the initial abrasion was still there, but I became like desensitized to it, maybe noticed the songs a little bit more. And, you know, I grew to really like it. And, you know, of course, throughout that year, you know, we can go back and remember that Death Grips was teasing this release. They already had announced it when they put out the Money Store, so everybody was ready for it. And obviously the Money Store making such a major splash that it did, everybody was waiting for No Love Deep Web, and then the huge surprise came, the bait and switch on their record label. They leaked it. It had the polarizing cover art that is now infamously attached to it. And yeah, I mean, it became the most pirated album at the time, you know, and even myself, I downloaded it, I think the night after, because I remember it leaked pretty late in the night, and it floored me right off the bat. You know, when Come Up and Get Me came on, I just didn't know what to make of it, but I was so just like excited about it. I mean, it was just, I mean, it changed everything for me. Because then after that, really getting into that record, going back again, revisiting the Money Store and getting a new appreciation for that, and for Ex-Military, and for the self-titled EP, I became an instant fan for life after that. It also kind of instilled a certain taste inside of me after listening to those early Death Grips records, where nothing else was aggressive enough, or nothing else really like scratched that itch like this did. You know, I mean, it pretty much took over all of the aggressive hardcore and punk and metal albums that I thought were really like abrasive and heavy sounding, and just kind of like squashed all those expectations, and overall kind of like shifted the entire landscape in the music industry for how people release albums, how they promote them, what they sounded like. So that's a topic for another day that I'll get into. And I do have a couple copies of this on vinyl. Here's a sealed one that I keep, that I picked up at a local record store a while ago, and it stays sealed. It's got the, you know, the black X-rated bag on it, because we all know what's underneath. So this is just like a collector's piece for me. I want to keep it sealed, because I do have one that I play that's opened. No, this is not one of the really cool first like Harvest record presses that were showing up on their merch tables. I didn't get one of those, but, you know, still a must-own for me overall, and just kind of like a, you know, 1-2 punch of 2012 for Death Grips that were like classic for experimental music, I think. Next up is going to be an album from 1989 from the Pixies, and that's Surfer Rosa. Now, I was familiar with the Pixies overall. I wouldn't say I really like sunk my teeth into them. This is probably around 2013 at this time, where I was being exposed to a lot of newer music, to me at least, and when I was in college, I'd watched a movie called The United States of Leland, and there are a few Pixies tracks featured on that soundtrack that caught my ear at the time when I watched it. But for some reason, you know, after that, I was like, oh, I like these tracks. You know, they're cool. I never went back into the album that they came from, or like just like their discography for some reason. And then one of my friends was like, yeah, the Pixies are like the best band ever. I mean, you have to listen to them. And I was like, you're crazy. And then I listened to them, and I was like, oh, okay. now I understand where he's coming from. And, you know, I go back and forth between a few records in their discography as which ones are my favorite. At this point in my life, you know, I do think Surfer Rosa still is the one. It has all the special sauce, in my opinion. The feeling of that record just really evokes something special inside of me. Like, I'm transported back to all of these really happy memories when I hear a lot of these tracks, and they're not even associated with any of the subject matter, obviously, or, you know, I don't even know. I can't explain it. It's one of those things where if I'm really sad or depressed, I can listen to the Pixies, and I'll have a new appreciation for life at times, or I'm really happy and it just like goes along with that elation. Like I don't know, it's like lightning in a bottle, you know, the Pixies in general, especially this album right here. It is just so special to me, and I think overall, I mean, it changed rock, you know, and this is just a must listen if you haven't, obviously. Definitely suggest seeking out this pressing in particular. This is the mobile fidelity pressing. So super high quality here. I do believe it's limited to 5,000, so it might be kind of harder to track down. But this is a must-own, no matter how much you end up paying for it, if you can afford it. Here's the gatefold of it. And as with all mobile fidelity presses, they are on 180 gram, I believe, maybe 200. I don't know. They're really thick presses, and they sound incredible. It's like high fidelity sound. I don't know. You could argue back and forth like if it really makes a huge difference, but this pressing sounds fantastic. I mean, it's one of those records that's meant to be turned up extra loud to listen to. Like if you notice, you put on like just any other album at like, let's say volume 10, and it's loud. You put on the Pixies at the same volume and it's kind of quiet. It's almost like forces you to make it go to like 15 or 20 before it gets to that level. And then everything pops and it's like, ugh. But yeah, the Pixies now are my favorite band ever. So, this thing totally changed my life. And last up here is a more recent record, actually, from 2017, and that's SZA's Ctrl. Now, this is one of those records that really caught me by surprise when I first heard it. It was being passed around everywhere, super buzzed about, sort of controversial at the time for a lot of the subject matter and the lyrics on this thing, that I think became a lot more influential later on. As you can hear, everyone in R&B now doing something similar to SZA. But the reason why this record really impacted my life and changed it is because, I don't know, I feel like for so long I was like an outsider looking into like pop and R&B. And, you know, I know this isn't necessarily like just a pop record. It's more like R&B, if anything. But, you know, to listen to tracks that kind of the appeal is different, if you will, in like pop, in R&B field. This one was one of those ones that kind of bridged the gap for me and kind of was like a aha moment, because, you know, the melodies are so good. SZA's vocals are just like amazing on this album overall. And I think a lot of the crossover appeal with hip hop on here was what really got me to pay attention to it. And then I could just kind of feel myself changing with my taste after it, because it's kind of like a hip hop record on the surface, but reveals itself later to be more of those like that leans on R&B. I'm not going to sit here and just review this record, obviously, because, you know, pretty much all of us have heard it by now. But yeah, I mean, it was just one of those ones now, because once I heard this and I got really into it, that just opened the door for like everybody else that followed. You know, I started getting into like Charlie XCX. After, I know different sounds, but it really just kind of like expanded my mind and say, well, you know, if I enjoy this, then maybe I should try these kind of things and see if they feel the same. And, you know, I was right, because now I'm obsessed with pop music, and I can't see myself not being, you know. And so this is a nice pressing. It's one that I suggest grabbing if you're a fan. It's got a nice gatefold on here. It's some more artwork, with SZA looking amazing inside of it. And this one I will show because it's pretty cool. It's like a green pressing. I think it's a first press. I'm not sure. There's probably a lot of presses of this at this point, but I picked this one up right when it went up for sale through my local record store. So, you know, it is one of the earlier ones. And yeah, this one has stood the test of time for me. You know, I feel like I can still revisit this album, and it brings back a lot of shitty memories, to be honest with you. But you know, I think a lot of the music on here just transcends some of those feelings and memories that I was having at the time when I was really getting into it. And it's kind of like, you know, brought in a new wave of experiences recently in my life, because I'm in, you know, a better place. So yeah, that's gonna do it for this segment of 5 albums that changed my life. I hope you guys enjoyed it. And like I said, let me know if there's any of these other types of videos you'd like to hear from me. I'd love to hear what you have to say. And yeah, if you did like the video, make sure to drop that like, hit the subscribe button if you want more content from me, and make sure to ring that bell actually too so you can get notified when I post. Peace.